Oh, let's see if everyone's, oh, and I haven't got, we'll go ahead and, yeah, if you want, I'm going to go ahead. Right now, everyone's muted as you came in. If you'd like to unmute, we're going to let, see if there's a few more minutes to pass before we get started, just to make sure everyone's had a chance to join, maybe just another minute or so. Uh, Hi, Crystal. I see. Let's see. Hi, Jill. How are you? And then, yeah, if you need to, I'm going to leave you the permission to unmute yourself if you want to. Feel free to. Uh, I did want to have a few moments to actually see if anyone had any questions before we get started about the program. And if you try to reach out to me, I'm going to make sure to have all my information posted. But if you need any other uh, assistance afterwards, I will going to follow up and with everybody at the after the presentation. All right. Well, so I'd like to take a moment to just introduce myself. I'm going to go ahead and start. It's 4:01. My name is Stephen Pointer, and I am uh, uh, right now I'm in the Holocaust Center. We are closed at the moment. To introduce myself, if you've ever had a presentation from Mitch Bloomer, he was our resource teacher for the past 25 years at the museum with OCPS, and I learned a lot from Mitch, and I have worked with him for a number of years, and I have been fortunate enough that after Mitch's retirement to be able to step in and try to, I'll say, fill his shoes, but really I don't think I can fill his shoes because Mitch is one of a kind and a fantastic individual, and I can only bring what I can to the table. And I'd like to welcome you all to our first fall presentation in our Dr. Norman M. Wall Professional Development Series, from Democracy to Dictatorship: Hitler's Consolidation of Power. I'd like to have this as open and discussing as possible, just because I think it'll get really boring just listening to me talk for 2 hours. So I hope even if you are, needing to be off screen, that's fine. But if you're able to, feel free to ask any questions. You want to do the hand raise and then unmute. I would love to answer and create an open dialogue because, I, I don't know the last time many of you have had an observation. But if having an administrator walk into the room, and if you're talking the entire time, if you're in high school, I'll guarantee you will get a ding on your observation for doing all of the talking and not doing having a student-centered classroom. So I'm going to go ahead just now, and I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully everyone will see what I need them to see. And I also would love for everyone to bear with me because this is new for me. And I will say this. Let's see, how many of you are having to present to students in person and on a type of digital platform? Is that common that you guys are all having to do that? I'm thinking a lot of many of you are having to do that, which makes it which makes it difficult, makes it harder for everyone to have to present in both ways. And I'll say, even for me, I can't imagine, what most teachers are going through on a daily basis. And in the classroom, I was in a classroom last week, and I had to present standing in front of someone's laptop and also presenting to their live students. And I think just the idea of having to create multiple lessons that are digital as well as lessons for in-person is a real challenge. So I just want to say my hat's off to all of you, because I was a digital person and I was always used to digital lessons. So that wasn't difficult for me, but I know for a fact that even if you are doing things digitally and in person simultaneously is difficult, especially in our COVID situation that we're in right now. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. I I had a lesson in the beginning. I was going to present to everyone just to kind of talk to each of you, and and how to choose pictures, especially when you're teaching about the Holocaust. What type of, and I would like if you could please, even type it in the chat or unmute yourself. When people choose pictures, often of the Holocaust, what type of pictures do you think are most suitable in a classroom environment? When you're using as pure primary sources. What do you see shown in classes? Jill?
Yeah, so I try and find things that there's a good mixture of things that they've seen over and over again, because there are some that they're very commonly used across all, like a lot of books, different places, movies, media, and things. And then I also try and look for some that are uncommon, but not the, not starting with the camp or anything, but really looking at, especially from the beginning, from democracy to dictatorship, looking at that beginning, what did life look like, understanding, what Germany looked like in the lives of people in Germany.
And that's a perfect way. I mean, that's a perfect way, I think, to look at it, because when oftentimes people go right to the camps and wish to show images of death. And I think it's more important to be really careful and thoughtful in your choices. The picture I've chosen, if you look, I've chosen not to glorify Hitler in the pictures of him saluting and having the eagle behind him. I've showed him up in a picture of deference to President Hindenburg. And if you look at the image, I chose that picture on purpose. In our next series presentation that will be in October, I'm going to actually have an entire section where we're going to talk about choosing appropriate images. And I've gone to a few classes that I've had to really help flesh out what I think is a good pedagogy for choosing the right type of images for your classroom. They're not just age appropriate, but that take a number of other considerations into play. So today, where I'm going to go to is, first, let's introduce myself again. My name is Stephen Pointer. I am the resource teacher here at the Holocaust Music Center. And I also work for Orange County. And this is unique in the state of Florida in that I work for both. I'm actually stationed here at the Holocaust Memorial Resource and Education Center, and I report to curriculum and at OCPS. And my email for the center it's easiest for me to respond to is on the screen. I will send you a follow-up email when we're done. And make sure everyone's got that. If I would love to, for everyone, just if you can just take a brief second, if you can, if you're able to introduce yourself and where you teach out of, and kind of what your interest is in the Holocaust, as far as why you're attending this session. Jill, since you're unmuted, that'd be great if you would.
Don't worry. So currently I am not actually teaching Holocaust, so I have done that for easily 20 plus years. But I do, well, now I'm on furlough, but normally I do facilitate programs at the Walt Disney World for college and high school students, and a lot of it has to do with getting along and things which are lessons of the Holocaust in its own way. And I'm always interested in keeping up to date on the pedagogy for teaching the Holocaust and the new things that are out there, because you never know when I'm going to put my, feet back in the fire.
Understood. Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're able to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody care to volunteer to go next? I was thinking I'd call on everyone just had their screens up. So Miss Connery, would you mind introducing yourself? Did I print? Oh, here, I think I can.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
I'm Debbie.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Good. I don't have my picture up today because I washed and rolled my hair. I don't want to be on screen.
That's okay. I don't want to be on screen most of the time myself.
But listen, I wanted to take this class because I am so concerned about our situation in America right now. I've studied a little bit about some of the ways that Hitler assumed power, and I can see parallels between what's happening in America now. But I'm very concerned. So I thought I would try to learn more so I could get maybe a more accurate, have a more accurate view of what I think that I'm seeing and what I'm maybe not seeing.
Completely understood. Completely understood. I think that's fantastic. I really strive to, tell my students always, we're continually, even as long as I've been, studying the Holocaust, there's always layers to peel back and things we can learn, and we will see, we'll see parallels, and we'll try to continue to peel back those layers. But I think as long as we're trying to understand, it really,
The pattern.
yes, I think it's just important, and when as long as you're continuing to develop and do that, I think it's more and more important, because you want to also teach this to kids today, and the relevance of history, and
Yes.
it's when people stop seeing these parallels, these patterns, we're often doomed to have repeats.
Right.
And I think one of the we look at the Holocaust and say when it happened, so long ago, but was it really that long ago? And then looking at Germany itself, it wasn't like Germany was a place where anyone expected anything like what happened to happen.
Exactly. A little bit about me. I taught 45 years for Orange County Schools. Now I'm teaching part-time, except I'm on furlough. I teach ESOL. And most of the students I have come from, I don't have them now because we're furloughed, as I said, and from Colombia, Venezuela and Cuba, and many other places. So that's what I do, but I'm on furlough.
Okay. Well, I hope that ends soon for you. That's I know a lot of people who are on furlough right now. That is, and it's really a difficult position to be in. This is honestly, I was never expecting to start this position in this kind of fashion. But nevertheless, I think Zoom has changed the way I don't think Zoom is going to go away anytime soon. And even when we do go back to face-to-face, definitely can possibly, help us. For those of you who can't always drive here or meet in places, this does, create another avenue.
It's a terrific opportunity to learn something new.
Fantastic. Would anybody else like to jump in and introduce themselves?
Am I on? No.
You are, I hear. Let's see. Let's see, I'm trying to think, who is Miss Connery? Trying to think of who's speaking and who is not. I did hear somebody just now.
I think that was Nancy Lee.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nancy. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Anyway, I'm having internet connection problems, and it went out during Jill's presentation, so I'm not sure. But you just want an introduction?
Sure.
I'm a certified social studies teacher, but right now I substitute. And actually, right now I'm not doing that because of COVID. But I usually substitute in high school and also at Orange Technical College, but mostly Winter Park High. And my certification is Social Studies 6 through 12. And I came from Miami, and I started Holocaust studies in Miami. And then when I came up here, I was introduced to the Holocaust Center and have taken courses there ever since. And you might think I don't have much opportunity to teach the Holocaust as a sub, but I really do, because it can be intertwined into so many things, whether it doesn't just have to be social studies, it can be language arts, it can be psychology, it can be a lot of different areas. So I get to teach it quite a bit, and I don't unfortunately get to teach any units or full blocks. And that's a little disappointing, but it's sometimes interesting to pick up. Often their teacher is doing Holocaust and you can pick up where they're at. And I've really enjoyed learning through the years. I heard your presentation because I attended the teachers, the Summer Institute, which I've done. This was my 14th year. And I just get so much out of it year after year. So I really appreciate what the Holocaust Institute does for teachers, because it's my basic resource. As a sub, that's where I go. So I want to thank you for that. I have to apologize. Our computer does not have a camera on it, so I'm always a black square, but you know, probably that's fine for you.
That's okay. No, that's okay.
Anyway, it's not that I want to be antisocial. I can't put the camera on. But as I said, the internet was going out. What was any other things you wanted to address, or just introduce ourselves?
That's all, just basic introduction. And I'm going to try to do my best to keep us, I know everyone might not have time for introductions in general, or might not want to be, I mean that they don't want to have, they might not want to hop on and speak out loud. I'm only doing these kind of impersonal because we don't have a large group. Normally, probably if we had 30 or 40, I wouldn't have as much time, because I know everyone wants to get to everything. But I also wanted to make sure that we knew who we were on with and why everyone was here. I think I have two others possibly who haven't. Amanda or Crystal, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sorry.
Oh, here we go. Oh, might be difficult too. Here, I'll get, I think, I don't think I can hear.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. The person that was supposed to come up and watch my class didn't, so I was teaching, so I apologize. I teach 8th grade in Sarasota County at Brookside Middle, and this is my 34th year teaching, and we are right now in the beginning stages of learning about Anne Frank. So I have had a deep interest in understanding more about, like with Hitler, because there's not a great deal of information to share with my kids. And I was telling my last period what I was going to do. And I'm like, so I can give more information to you guys. So, no, I want as much information as I possibly can. And it's sad that, we can't go to the Holocaust Museum. I've taken my kids there every chance that we've been able to. And they were asking me, can we go this year? And I'm like, I don't think so, unless there's some type of virtual tour. That would be the only way.
We're trying to work on that. We're trying to work on everything that we can. And we'll reach out with everybody as we can, but we're really glad you're able to attend now. And also, when we're done, you'll make sure you have all my information. So if you need any other resources, be happy to try to help get you some. Or even I am offering virtual, like if you'd like to Zoom me into your classroom as well, I'm also able to set that up to be able to speak to your students if you like, if that's helpful.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. All right. I don't think I'm missing anybody else. But I do want to.
This is Eric Sagabarth. How you doing, Steve? I met you at the center.
Yes, we did.
You gave me that big pile of books. Thank you very much.
Nice. Real pleasure to see you again.
I've broke the backs of all of them, but haven't read any of them through and through yet. So,
fantastic.
Yep. This is my 11th year as a second career public school teacher. Been teaching the Holocaust the whole time. I don't think a day goes by where you can't use it as an example if you're a history teacher or you're talking about current events and that type of thing. And I'm the son of a German immigrant who came here in 1939 at the age of 10 with his family to escape Adolf Hitler. So it's always been a passion of mine. My dad was always very was very ashamed of the whole thing. Didn't like to talk about it or anything like that. And of course, what's the best way to overcome that but through education and to find out more information? And of course, the information that we get just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, if you remember a couple of years ago, we found out that there were over 300 concentration areas in Europe during the Holocaust because of all the information that has come out from, you know, the former Eastern Bloc countries and that type of thing. So, you know,
it's you always, yeah, again, we're always peeling back layers, always finding something. Yep. It's why
I used Adolf Hitler the other day in a government class as an example of, you know, we're all talking about defunding the police and making our police less and that type of thing. Well, Adolf Hitler said the same thing. Why? Because he wanted to bring in the brown shirts, which of course he pillaged with the Knight of Knives and brought in the SS. So history repeats itself, unfortunately. I hope it doesn't here in the United States. Thanks. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being here. Well, all right. I believe I've got my introductions out of the way. Let me go into our kind of like next, kind of go through our today's agenda. So what I'm looking at is first, I'm going to cover something. You know, I try to pick one thing at the beginning of each lesson that, you know, is really you know, suited around what teachers need. You know, some things will be more exciting than others, but teaching historical literacy skills is really important and how we view things. Also, then we'll go right into the steps to Hitler's consolidation, which is looking at Hitler's appointment as Chancellor, the Reichstag Fire, the Enabling Act, and following anti-Jewish actions and legislation, the Night of the Long Knives, and the Death of Hindenburg. And then I will give you a link to some suggested lessons that you can use in your class. They're just suggestions. They're lessons. Some lessons we've developed here at the center, and some lessons that I've used in my classes that I find really interesting. You know, I try to, and I hope, you know, my goal is when we do some of these presentations also to bring in guest speakers, because, you know, just like Eric was saying, you know, we're always peeling back the layers, and I learn something new and from somebody new all the time. I am kind of keeping today's topic, you know, broad, and I'm, you know, kind of approaching it as though many people may or may not be aware of some of the details that I will cover, depending on how long you've been teaching history or how long you've been involved in teaching about the Holocaust. So some things I won't intentionally skip over, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of follow along with the presentation and the discussions, and hope that we can round out, you know, some good discussion points. One of the ways I've always taught Holocaust is I used to teach Holocaust, and I paired it up with sociology. And coming up, you know, I believe we have a Holocaust survivor coming to speak for the center. It's Peter Feigl, and in the book Salvage Pages, which is a wonderful collection of diary entries from you know, young writers or diary writers who some perished and some survived the Holocaust. You know, he asked his parents for a book on sociology. I think it's really important, rather than just make history about memorization of dates and names. And I always told my students this when they came in. Many of you are history buffs, and you know the ins and outs of every weapon anyone fires. You know the dates, names of every battle. But I think history is more important than that, and studying the Holocaust is about the individual stories. And I like to see more testimony used, because everyone has a perspective on how history is unfolding right now. You know, everyone has their own perspective, and understanding that perspective is important, and trying to peel back the layers rather than just saying, well, this is what it is. You know, everything affects everyone differently. And I was always really big on, you know, in sociology teaching, you know, in-group outward behaviors, the origins of discrimination, ethnocentrism, you know, believing that your group is better and more powerful than the other, that you should be on top. You know, these are the foundations for discrimination and prejudice. And I focused on that probably a little more intensely. So when we came to studying the Holocaust, we were studying behaviors, because one thing, a mistake that people do when they're talking about the Nazis all too frequently is they refer to them as monsters. Does anyone can want to step up and tell me why why it's not the way you should, when you're talking to your students, why you should refer to the Nazis or as monsters or some type of creature?
Excuse me. Hi,
Hi.
it's Debbie. I think maybe because this may be totally wrong, so I'm just throwing this out there because they're normal. They look like normal people, and in some cases, you wouldn't recognize that their behaviors or their motives were. You would recognize them as being dangerous. I mean, you know how, I mean, just their appearance maybe that they didn't look like monsters. Is that what it is? They look
Well,
like normal people, or?
you're kind of on track. But what I was thinking more along the lines of is, I mean, you are. They do. Anyone could have been, but these actions were just normal people. They were. There's nothing different about them. These were normal, regular people. By creating them in a view of children as they are monsters, that does have us looking for something like, as far as monsters. What does a monster look like? These are actually regular, normal, everyday people. And there have been experiments, and I'll talk about them later, but the Milgram's experiment, where any one of us is capable, anyone here in this call is capable of great good, and any one of us in this call is capable of great evil.
Yeah.
We're just human beings. And these are not excuses for the behaviors, but they're understanding people are people. And under the right circumstances, you may, in a choiceless choice, or may because you can chalk it up to, evil. But I always try to avoid using simplistic terms when talking about the Nazis or talking about the Holocaust, because it oversimplifies. And it's a tactic used by the Nazis oftentimes when talking about Jews and talking about enemies of the state, communists, or people who are disabled. Using simplified terms are used to appeal to masses, because we like that. I always tell my kids to think about, in the old days when you watched the cowboy movie and you saw the one in the white hat and the one in the black hat.
Yeah.
Who was the bad guy?
Yeah.
The one in the black hat was the bad guy, and the one in the white hat. We like simple answers. But unfortunately, people are more complex than that. You are more complex than one individual action that you do, or even a few, and we are just people for that matter. So I try to, really avoid these types of answers, but it's a common thing done in classrooms today, and we want students realizing that anyone could have been there and could have done this. So I like to always start at the beginning. I mean, in my classes, I would start with, origins of anti-Semitism and the creation of Germany as a nation, World War I, and go all the way through to after 1945, and that we had a half a year. But one of the things I like to step into is looking at making sure I'm using, we use lots of literature. We have lots of diaries. I've got, the great, I'll show you a couple that I use. This is, Documents of the Holocaust is a great book. You can find a lot of these, online, and the Salvage Pages is another fantastic book to use. I believe the Salvage Pages was handed out in for the teacher BD. This is a fantastic collection of diary entries. It is, that it is great to use as primary source material, because this happened to people, and it was created, and the perpetrators were people. Just that simple. So I tell people, use images, and literacy skills involves looking at images, looking at political cartoons. I mean, today we don't really have a whole lot of political cartoons, but we have memes. This is the meme culture out there. I'll never get it, but I'll pretend to. Yes, satire. I think Gary Larson is the last starts with cartoons that I still laugh at, and Far Side stuff. But I tell teachers it's important to not just have kids memorizing history. and also to think critically, become historians, investigate. And, even when I look at a book, one of the biggest complaints parents have about history books when we teach history in class is like, well, you got this one history book and it might be skewed. It's one perspective, or it's written by 4 people. Whenever I teach about the Holocaust, I say, there's a myriad of sources out there. Use as many sources as you can, to be able to show, the different perspectives. And I think I used to do activities in my class to show these perspectives, because everyone has, at the end of the day, it's kind of like using the telephone game. Okay. Have you ever played a telephone game where you give a message to somebody and you have them repeat it to another person, and then if you go down by the 13th or 14th person, the whole message has changed? Well,
Yes.
This is the same here. I mean, even though we write things down, there are people hear things differently, see things differently, and they base their perspectives off of, what they witnessed, what they saw, and based on their own ideologies. So it's important to examine. Some of the skills I like to look at are, sourcing, cooperation, checking documents. Are these documents factual? Even if just because they suit your narrative, does that mean they're necessarily factual? And I'll give you a perfect example I have students who would bring in, they use imagery that they found for the Holocaust for some presentations. And one of the things I would get bothered by is I'd say, did you check to see where this image came from? And it would be a forgery. And I said, now what's the problem with using an image that is not real of the Holocaust? What's wrong with using the image if it gets the point across?
It's not reliable at all. I mean, it's not telling you the truth.
It's not reliable. It's not telling you the truth. This is ammunition for Holocaust deniers.
Sure.
Going, well, it has the right message. And I tell everybody that. I said, even when I'm arguing, messages today, like, use facts, use real facts, use real information. Don't, I said, when you start making things up, even if it fits your narrative, you wind up putting holes in the truth, and you wind up you're no longer teaching history then.
Primary sources, and then secondary sources. Those are really the only ones you should use.
Exactly.
If you're a true historian.
Also, contextualizing. One thing that people do is we like to show images, and as images as primary sources, and or even diary entries, and we don't provide the proper context for the images, or we use some of the examples I like to say is, the boy in the Warsaw Ghetto is often used as an image, frequently when talked about the Holocaust. And in all honesty, it's a very powerful image, but some people use it, I think, in the wrong way, because the image was taken by Nazi guards to be used as evidence, because they were rounding the boy up. I'm just saying, to look at different perspectives, they were rounding the boy up and calling him a bandit, that he had helped in the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and that he was being, and they were the commandant was trying to show, some of the other officials that what they had done positively, and rounding up and quashing this uprising. Now, but we often put our own narrative, because photos are shown without the proper subtitles or context. Close reading is probably most done in most classes. I have a lesson I'm going to provide you guys that I use. That's Hitler's first radio broadcast. And you can find recording of it, but I often times take segments out of the radio broadcast, and I would give it to my students out of context, and I would give it to them in segments, and I'd say, what type of political official do you think this is, and do you think they are a person that you would admire? And I would leave out certain things and omit certain words. And the kids, well, this person sounds great. They have the best interest of the country at heart there. Do you hear much political rhetoric about, a marginalization or any other bad things? No, this all sounds good. And when you reveal this is a, this is Hitler's first radio address, kids are taken aback. So I like to say, look at the languages, the language Hitler uses, the symbols, the imagery that he uses to persuade his audience. This is, a common mistake that even as Hitler comes out, that in his first speeches that he's saying, let's, immediately going after all the Jews, while he does, but it's not as pervasive, which is one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of, people try to, leave even after the refugee crisis, but leave until Kristallnacht, because that's when you start seeing real open state-sponsored violence, even though precursors happen prior to that. So for those of you that are in a classroom, I would say, I'm not going to skip through this, but are there any literacy skills that you use when you're teaching? So I don't know, for those of you who are in class, I'd say, since I think Ms. Connery is driving, Eric, what do you use in your class when you're going over your primary sources?
I use a lot of annotating, because the hardest thing sometimes as you get that is the students to comprehend what they're reading. Sometimes it's in different language that they're used to, and words that they don't understand, looking those up. We do it as a group. And I'm just sitting here looking at one of the books you gave me. I Never Saw a Butterfly. I've used some of those poems in there. And we have a process we use where you go through there, you underline the 4 best verses, and then you pick one and you write about why you like the 1 out of the 4. And of course, also we read them out loud, because poetry is meant to be read out loud. It's not, to me, you could read it silently, but if you have people, the poet should read it. But I would say that's the biggest thing. And then also trying to take it and relate it to current day, maybe something that's going on in their life or has gone on, to be able to do that. So those are the kind of things that we do. I think annotating is the biggest thing, because understanding what they're talking about, and also trying to put the whatever narrative, whether it's prose or poetry or short story, trying to put it in the context that it actually happened. So sort of set the scene, initially.
Very much so. I think it's a great strategy. Those are all great strategies I've used in my classrooms. Great ways to really peel back the layers, and also to help kids with understand things contextually, information, and be able to, because one word can change the entire meaning of a sentence, and when students don't understand that word, often as teachers we just assume. And here's the thing: is I'm guilty of this. I've done this before, where in my mind I've used a term or a word in class, and I've just assumed that my kids understood it or knew what it meant. And to me, it was, I know this, and I've caught myself, and I've had someone kind of quietly raise their hand, going, I don't know what, even we're looking at Jewish immigration with an E. We're looking at immigration, not knowing what immigration means. Sound like something simple, in my mind, because I'd covered it 1,000 times and talked about it. But there are other terms that I think are even, so I think finding out and helping your students through that process is really important, especially if you look at some of these, if you open up the salvaged pages and you look at some of these, diaries and some of the writings of some of these students, and these kids who are, 12 to 15 years of age, thinking the complexity level of their language is far beyond what I see in, students have today, because diarying, in a journal, journaling is not as common. And when it is, it's done with tweets or with Instagram or with Snapchat. And it's done with a certain amount of characters. Doesn't make it less relevant, but it's just different. And just need to be able to peel back those layers. Jill, is there anything that in your lessons that you used?
Well, I just wanted to comment on what you just said about the diaries, because one of the things that's also really different and for young people especially, but even high school students, it's a whole, the generation is brand new in what they don't know, that we take for granted, of the things that we learned in the 60s that were part of kind of everyday life, but it's kind of further and further away. But the things that the kids do now, they're specifically putting them out to be seen, right? So they want someone to pay attention to them. They're looking for the reader, as opposed to some of these diaries, which they were in the true sense of that word diary. It was between the writer and the page. And they really never had an expectation that somehow or another this would get into public view. So that also impacts what's in there.
Very personal and very personal. Yeah, that's I I don't come, even including my own kids who are all teenagers except for my one that will be a stepchild soon, but she's 5 and precocious. But the you know, teenagers today, they do relish in putting so many things out there and more for show. So it's very different. But that means all the more when they see diary entries, they you know, I think it's really important. And not just, you know, we talk about Anne Frank. You know, I think it's important to expose your students to as many entries, and you don't have to give them the entire book. It can be in portions that relate to your lessons. One of the things I love about, and I hate to keep referring to the salvage pages, but I'm going to, but you can pull out segments based off any lesson, whether you're talking about civil disobedience, immigration, Kristallnacht, where there are sections where you can just pull out paragraphs or single day diary entries that are actually no more than a paragraph, and get so much out of that one entry to show what this person was thinking. And that's when I talk about, you know, using primary sources in the Holocaust. You know, what better way to, you know, memorialize and commemorate than to use the words of someone as a survivor or someone who perished, to be able to, so those words stay alive. That the person is remembered. It's so important that we use that more often, because I was talking with a daughter of a survivor the other day, and he was sitting in the back and she was talking, and she says he's so afraid that he talks because he's afraid he'll be forgotten, and what she said was she's afraid that his story will just become history. And it really struck me when the way she said that, you know, having his story just become history. At what point in time are we talking about going another, you know, 100 years or so and having people look back and just seeing the Holocaust as a potential just something that happened, an atrocity, and forgetting that people lost their lives, were targeted for extermination in one of the worst events in human history. And
we as educators need to continue to tell the story. And like you said, the best way to tell it is through individual stories, because people can relate to that better.
Very much
from an individual standpoint, because they can put themselves in their shoes. But the story of the Holocaust needs to go on forever and ever and ever and ever. So unfortunately, we've repeated it a few times, not to the degree that the one, you know, during World War II, but we need to keep telling the story.
Yeah, that's what you know. I think you're right. It's the personal stories that you get to tell it. I think it's one of the things we've gotten away from oftentimes when I see, you know, unfortunately in classrooms where we begin teaching to the standard, and then the individual story gets lost. It's more about remembering the events as a sequence of events. And you know, I used to tell my kids, each one of your stories matters. Every one of you matter. Wouldn't you like to know 100 years from now that your story matters, that you as an individual, you know, count? And I think, you know, when we're looking at the Holocaust as something that happened to individuals that need to be humanized and not just look at as a bland, you know, an event to be covered. And oftentimes, if you look at a lot of history classes today, the Holocaust is a page turned. You get in U.S. history, the Holocaust starts with Kristallnacht, and then as a page in between the sheets of World War II. And that's how it kind of is covered in many books. I think there's ways to, even if you only have a day to talk about the Holocaust, that you can still humanize it more. And you know, when I talk about this class, one of the important things in looking at the Holocaust is looking at, you know, how Hitler got to where he got to. And, you know, I'm going to just look at a little bit of prior knowledge before we get started. So I'm going to kind of kick into this. You know, this is just a little kind of summary of looking at Hitler's progression. from his birth all the way to 33 when he becomes chancellor. And what we're really going to be focusing on today is looking at January 30th, 1933, Hitler's appointment as chancellor, all the way up until he declares himself the Führer. Bless you. And in a summary, if you aren't familiar, Germany. We're looking at the 1930s. So what's going on right now in the 1930s in the world? 1929.
The stock market crash.
Stock market crashes, and then we go into a global Great Depression. In the 20s, Germany had already gone through a series had formed after the end of World War I, formed a new democracy called the Weimar Republic. And I'm just saying this for those of you who may not know. And they developed their own constitution that was very much modeled after kind of what you see in the United States. They had a Supreme Court, at the Reichstag and the Reichsrat, a form of parliament, a president, and a chancellor. And the government was very new. It was very weak, and it had enemies from within and without. It was run by the Social Democrats, who were often viewed as by members of the Conservative Party as as the individuals, along with the Jews, who had basically caused Germany to lose the war in the first place. There was a sense of defeat when hyperinflation kicked in, and the value of the mark went down to nothing. There was a period in the 20s which there was a brief respite with the Dawes Plan that loaned Germany some money to help get them back on their feet to pay back their war reparations to France. Unfortunately, that fell through with the Great Depression, and it really paved the path, because you've got if you've ever watched, there's a great movie to watch called The Wave. It looks at the Nazis, the general appeal. It's based off a psychological experiment. There's a German version of it called Die Welle, Diewelle, but it's The Wave. There's one and it kind of a teacher created a mentality of Nazism within his class. But if you look at the overall sense of distrust in the government that was brewing, as well as everyone in Germany pretty much feeling the government and the new government had failed them. And remember, what type of government had Germany had just before this new democracy? They were ruled by the Kaiser, an emperor, a king, an individual leader who knew the direction of the country. There was a big sense of ethnic pride in being German, and that pride was taken away with things like the War Guilt Clause, which was a stipulation in the Treaty of Versailles that Germany had to take full blame for causing World War I. So with these things, feeling wounded, pride hurt, Hitler used this very frequently, and he used the Treaty of Versailles in a lot of speeches. Tear up the Treaty of Versailles. The November criminals, the communists, want to undermine us from within and tear Germany down. And this democracy is been a burden on all of us. And we look at Hitler growing in power, and I'm not going to really go over the elections. That's a whole other lesson. But Hitler manages to get enough pull in by getting Nazi seats in the Reichstag that they managed to. Von Papen, who was at the one time the chancellor and becomes the vice chancellor, is convincing the President Hindenburg that we needed the Nazi votes and the seats for the Reichstag, and the best way to do that would be to appoint Hitler as chancellor. Initially Hitler didn't want to settle for less, but he takes his appointment as chancellor of Germany. So what we're really looking at today is what are the main actions, main events that really helped Hitler consolidate this power to establish his dictatorship. I mean, how do you take a democratic country and within 18 months turn it into a dictatorship? That is a relatively short period of time to change an entire form of government. And while there are many things that take place in 1933, a lot of the sub events that happen couldn't take place without these main things occurring. And so what we're really going to look at today is try to, how did Hitler consolidate his power? And our objective is to try to identify the key events that helped Hitler to establish his dictatorship. This is, really important. And if I go, too fast, let me know. And I will pause. We'll have some question points we're going to try to go through. I really appreciate all the great discussion. I really do. This has been really good so far. So, within 18 months, Hitler turns himself into a dictator. He's divided up members of the Reichstag. Any of his opponents were demoralized and weakened. His political opponents are, they are afraid from below with the SA. And if you're not familiar with SA, these are the stormtroopers, the brown shirts, the Sturmabteilung, and then you've got the Hitler now has governmental control. This is from above. If you're politically opposed to the Nazis, Germany's definitely not where you want to be at this point in time. We're going to kind of look at by the end of 1933, over 100,000 opponents have been arrested. Politicians have been outmaneuvered and removed. And the only threat Hitler really faced was from the actual army. I remember the SA numbered in the tens of thousands and had grown, and it was formed up of paramilitary groups of the Freikorps. These were like ex-military individuals who then eventually became the brown shirts and almost grew to outnumber the army of the Wehrmacht. And the only opposition Hitler really had was from the legitimate army itself, because it was committed to the new government, that was committed to the new the Weimar government, and that was a fear Hitler had: is how do I get the army on my side? The term is Gleichschaltung. This means coordination. This is a coordinated effort by Hitler to create groups and organizations that help to fuel Nazi mentality, ideology, everything from looking at the Hitler Youth, make sure all aspects of society all revolve around Nazi ideology within the classroom, within governmental procedures, laws. And we're not going to get heavily into it because this gets more into the mid to late 30s, because we're really only going to 1934 today. But organizations that Germans had joined with the German Labor Front, Hitler Youth, these were organizations that were really set up to try to really build Germany up from the mess that was left. And that's the way Hitler presented it, was that Germany had fallen apart, had not just fallen on hard times, but the Social Democrats had failed to produce and had years, they had since the end of World War I to build and just demonstrate that this new democracy would be best for all of Germany. And if you look at Hitler's speech, if you pick up and take this assignment to your classroom, I really think it's really important to know in this little piece of primary source material, one thing Hitler says in his last lines is, give us 4 years. We will take Germany to a place it's never been to in 4 years. We promise, or we will step down as the Nazi Party. It's a bold promise to make. And so if you're an individual who's lost your land, okay, if you're an individual who has lost your job, if you're an individual who's lost faith and you watched the value of your dollar decrease to nothing, there's a good chance that you might buy into the Nazi ideology. And don't be confused by the term, socialism, you say National Socialism. One thing, Hitler wanted the industrialists, to make money. Hitler also wanted to create, when he looked at socialism, the idea of being socialist is referring to taking care of Germany as a whole for Germans. Okay, more than just, what we think of the general welfare of people. So one thing we got to do is let's define the enemy, and with that comes the Reichstag Fire. if, are you, those of you who are not familiar, the Reichstag is, this is the German Parliament building. And on the 27th of February, now this is, remember, Hitler's appointed Chancellor January 30th. Less than a month in, the Reichstag is destroyed by fire. And there's a picture of it on the right. And, Hitler shows up, and who do you think he blames this on? Say, Eric? Yeah, communists.
Yep, he hated communists more than he did, I think, Jewish people.
Communists are the first targets of the Nazis.
I
always say this too. The communists. Now, here's the thing. There's one thing we'll say is that there are many. There were many communists who were Jewish as well. But when you look at defining an enemy, Jews had been blamed for the loss of the war, the stab in the back myth, that Jews were the cause of all of Germany's problems. And remember, the percentage of the Jewish population in Germany was less than 1%. This is not major, but there was a quote unquote actual communist threat. You had seen it in the Spartacist revolt, where communists had tried to take over the government before. It was a clear and present danger, if you will. That was really presented to the people, and it was something people could relate to. They realized that this is an attack on Germany itself. So this young Dutch communist, Marnus van der Lubbe, was caught on the site, and he confessed. He was put on trial and executed. He was beheaded. There wasn't a lot of discussion afterwards because there were 4 other individuals who were found to not be guilty, and there's lots of speculation because, yes, if you're thinking this is rather convenient that it happened. Now, again, I like to play, when I'm talking to my students, I work in fact, not in speculation. However, historians have debated for a number of years and will say that they feel there is enough actual evidence, it's not fully accepted by all historians, that the Nazis set the fire, because this is a linchpin, this is a key moment in history that really, that happens to take place conveniently shortly after Hitler is appointed Chancellor. Hitler declared the fire as part of a communist conspiracy, and Hitler convinces Hindenburg to pass the Reichstag Fire decree. Article 48 is a convenient article written into the Weimar Constitution. Does anyone want to take a wild guess what Article 48 does? If you could wildly, it's speculation. This is a.
Wasn't that? Is that something to do with Hindenburg appointing him absolute ruler?
In a way it is. So yeah, Article 48, they also called it the suicide clause. And Article 48 gave the president the ability, in the event of an emergency, to basically declare absolute, kind of a authoritarian rule with the intention of keeping safety paramount for the German nation. And the idea being, there's no definition here for what is considered an emergency. And the clause is meant to, and this is, I cover this in sociology, different types of leaders. You have expressive leaders, and you have direct leaders as well. And, the idea being is that, the German people had been used to having the Kaiser make decisions for them. So in the event of an emergency, we don't need to have debate inside of, the idea was a debate about protecting the country. We should allow the president to just make decisions for us and know what's in the best interest of our country. And that was the intention. So we see Hindenburg giving Hitler these powers because he says, I know how to handle the communist threat. So this leads to it's called the Reichstag Fire Decree. Now, the actual name was for defense of the nation and state and to combat treason against the German nation and treasonable activities. Those are the names given to this. And here is just some of the text from it. So I'd like you to consider the 2 questions to the side. I'd like you to read this really quickly if you can, and I'll read it out loud for those of you who are just listening. I'm going to kind of skip over the sections. The Constitution of the German Reich are suspended until further notice. Thus, restrictions on personal liberty, on the right of free expression of opinion, including freedoms of the press and the right of assembly and association, are permissible beyond the legal limits of otherwise prescribed and laid down. If any German state that measures necessary for the restoration of public security and other order are taken, the right government may temporarily take it over the powers of the supreme authority, and in such as state in order to restore security. Now, this was based off of, so so he's justifying this because of why? So how are we justifying this to the people?
For their safety?
For their safety. You know, this is, I like to, so there's a, if you've never seen it, I have young kids, so I watch things like this, but there's a movie Disney called Zootopia. And the little sheep is, you know, is at the end is saying, how did you get everyone to buy into this? And they've created this it's predators versus prey, and the predators are bad. This is an allegory towards, you know, looking at minorities and the dominant group and the minority groups. And she says, how can you justify this? How do you get people to buy it? No one's going to believe this. And she's like, fear always works.
Yep.
Fear always works. People, when they're afraid, will give up security. We'll trade freedom for security. Sorry, we'll trade freedom for security in a heartbeat because they're afraid. How does this undermine democracy? How does this particular law here undermine democracy in spirit and in fact, based on what you see in this text? Jill.
Well, as I recall that like you said, that they had really set up kind of a balance of power to prevent something like or someone like Hitler taking over, and what they did was they just took that all away and allowed him to really come to power because there was no balance of power. So
really did. I mean, this undermines it completely, and the intention is, of course, to provide for safety for the country. So the intent still feels okay. And remember, I want you to keep going back to this. Everyone, we all say, how could you put this type of power in the hands of one individual? Most European countries had survived under, monarchies, Kaisers, czars for centuries. So the idea of having a single leader was considered a strength. Having one individual who knew how to make decisions for your country. I'm saying this is the mentality going back. I'm not saying it's right or whatever. I'm saying this is just the way it was. So the idea of giving power to one individual was not unheard of. This was not considered some far-fetched idea. Democracy was the new far-fetched idea, and it had not worked. Look at what it's created: chaos in the streets. That's this is what people are saying. So I'd like we're gonna play this here real quick. This is testimony of Ernest Udall. Please tell me if you cannot hear this. I would like to know you can actually hear if you can't, tell me or raise your hand.
It is started governing by special edicts.
You can't hear it, Jill?
I'm gonna try and fix my audio, see if I can get it higher.
See if you can hear it at all. I'll see if I can make sure that it is as loud as.
That existed in the unfortunate Weimar Constitution as a means when things are desperate, like the executive directives of the President of the United States, executive agreements and so on.
I'm going to play a subtitle real quick. So.
He began arresting people like this. Not so much Jews at that time, not in the first week, but he arrested communists and he arrested socialists.
Do you remember hearing about the Reichstag Fire?
Yes.
Can you give me a flavor of how it was reported? How these things were crossing the border and being reported to the...
We lived in Austria, and we didn't anticipate what would happen later to Austria. We thought Austria would get away as an independent country. We were hoping, people living in Austria were hoping that the friendship of Austria with Mussolini who in the beginning was the stronger, appeared to be the stronger of the two, would be helpful. It wasn't, as it turned out. But I remember that my memory of the Reichstag Fire is mixed, because I know I have heard, I have read about the Reichstag Fire when it happened. At that time it was presented as the act in the papers, in the German papers, and so copied by the Austrians with certain questions as the act of a Dutchman who was found wandering around in the burning Reichstag building and who was accused thereafter of having put the Reichstag on fire. Of course, I learned different later on in the Nuremberg trials.
We'll get to that later.
Okay, so
You mentioned the
did you, Jill? I mean, his was actually a rather quiet testimony, but were you able to hear his voice? Okay, so when you hear this, you know, he was in Austria at the time. So when you hear him talking about, you know, this is the news spreading at Reichstag Fire, you know, I want people to, you know, think about what do you think citizens, you know, felt. So not just German citizens, when you hear Austrian citizens, you know, you hear about these things happen. What do you think their reaction? Most people's. What do you think the reactions were that most citizens had to the Reichstag Fire? Anybody want to chime in?
I think they were shocked.
Oh,
I'm
Debbie?
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Debbie.
Maybe shock, fear that there was, you know, like 9/11, that kind of fear. That's what I think.
That's an excellent and comparison. I think the level of fear had to be right up there with things like 9/11. You know, you know, and then the range. That's what I was going to get to next. The range of responses that people might have had. You know, I mean, if you're using this compare and contrast of, like, you know, we know the differences, but the comparison to 9/11 and looking at the response, we find an enemy.
Right.
You know, and if you are, again, a person who has felt the security of Germany is already being threatened, you know, what does this, you know, now you got Hitler coming out, pointing out the enemy right away. Jill, did you have something to add?
No, I mean, she said it very well. I mean, and I think that even, unfortunately, the fact that we can't even compare it today, you know, wasn't something that we could compare to anything for our kids. But now it's like, what are the range of responses? We know the responses right now. And like you said, comparing it to 9/11, comparing it to anything, we want to know who did it. And is it a conspiracy? Are there other people out there? Are other people in danger? You know, so that was you know, that's what I was going to pretty much say, Debbie. So right on.
Definitely. So real quick, we'll get to, like, what he said. You know, we were listening before, and he was talking about the, you know, what he heard at the Nuremberg trials. There was testimony in Nuremberg trials given by a number of officials who actually placed the blame of the Reichstag fire. Actually said that Goering had set the fire and had a role in setting the fire. We have no historical proof to prove that, especially since the documentation has Marinus van der Lubbe actually confessing to the crime. But rumors spread that the Nazis had set the fire themselves. So if the Nazis, basically, we found out historically that the Nazis set the fire, does this, you know, of course, change your interpretation of this being happenstance, you know, as something that happened that, because, you know, we're looking at the powers of what this has given to Hitler. You know, right now we view it as, you know, Hitler defending Germany. Does this, you know, change the interpretation of everything? If you were presenting this to students, would this change the interpretation of students to looking at the images and listening to Hitler's responses?
Yeah, I think it would change the interpretation of it if you knew that they said it. You'd want to find what purpose, what was their reason for setting it.
Right. And I will tell you this, there's debates with historians as to looking when we talk about the Holocaust as it's intentionalist as opposed to functionalist. Intentionalist meaning that Hitler had the intention of enacting the Holocaust from the very beginning. And then there's functionalist as the meaning that the function of everything that as the dominoes fell and as they began to fall, that the Holocaust came out of the various aspects of Lebensraum, which is living space and creating the master race, etc. And these are debates, and they excerpts from Mein Kampf are used, etc. But was this the plan from the very beginning? Was Hitler planning to exploit Article 48 powers? Because again, Hitler initially did not want to take the position as Chancellor. He initially turned it down. He wanted to win and actually beat Hindenburg and to become president and wanted Nazis to have the majority. But this is what he's having to settle for at the moment. So when the fire happens, the Reichstag Fire decree is enacted, and Hitler calls for new elections. This is the one thing the president can do, and imagine this: the president can call for new elections anytime the president wants to. So the president calls for new elections, and the Nazi Party goes around and begins intimidating, knocking on doors, and basically trying to frighten and to scare everyone into believing that the Social Democrats and the Communists are the ruin of Germany, and we need to do everything we can to remove them. So a new election is held. The Nazi Party has 288 seats. Now, I tell my students to look at this chart, because there are others. There are 33 parties in the Reichstag. 33 parties. That's a lot. That means that if you're looking at this type of proportional representation, who has the majority? I mean, Eric, what do you say?
Nobody. They have to form a coalition, really.
Very good. That is exactly what we're looking for. Nobody has the majority. You have to form a coalition. So that's the only way you can actually get things done, is by forming a coalition in order to be able to gain a majority of the votes. That was one of the weaknesses of the Weimar democracy and the Weimar Constitution, is that you had all of these. If you couldn't form a coalition, you were left. The Center Party is also in this. That's the Catholic Center Party. So in the middle of this, Hitler makes an agreement with the Pope of the Reich Concordat, which is which is the agreement that pretty much the Nazis would leave the Catholics alone if they would basically side with the Nazis. The Social Democrats, we wanted to try to get them as pushed out as much as possible. And heck, we can just outlaw the Communist Party and say, you can't take your seats. So who wins the 1933 elections? Does this mean the Nazis have complete power? And Nazis did not have the majority, but what they did is they used the emergency powers to prevent the communists from coming in and taking their seats and voting. That, and getting the support from the Center Party, gives the Nazis the majority. Now Hitler controlling over half of the total seats. The Reichstag would now do as Hitler wanted. And you think, well, Hitler already had the fire degree powers, but Article 48 powers they were only intended to last during an emergency. Okay, so in comes the Enabling Act, or the Enabling Law, and it's just like what it sounds. So I'd like you to look at this picture. What do you, for those of you, if you know the history, you may know it, but what do you see here? Eric, I think
it looks like the brown shirts going into some kind of theater for some kind of rally or some kind of meeting.
So the brown shirts, it is the brown shirts, and they are going into some kind of theater there. But if you look at the sign on the wall, it says Reichstag.
Yep, it sure does.
So this is the Kroll Opera House. This is the temporary home of the Reichstag. And the brown shirts are all going in to kind of go around the seats to sit around the Reichstag, because Hitler is going to make an announcement that he needs, because Hindenburg has said, this effectively puts you in charge. I'm not going to approve this without the approval of the Reichstag. So Hitler goes and calls a meeting of the Reichstag and says, for the safety of Germany, I'm going to let you pass the law to remedy the distress of the people and the Reich. And initially, you think, why would anyone be okay with this? Well, with the Nazi Party now getting a majority, he needs buy-in from, he'd like buy-in from the other voters in the Social Democrats, and the communists are not able to take their seats. So with a little bit of intimidation, you imagine brown shirts all surrounding you, mild veiled threats, some not so veiled threats. This is how you're going to vote. This is how we expect you to vote. And Hitler announces in this meeting, peace or war, because we will pass this one way or another. And will it be peace or will it be war? We're going to pass this act. So it's called the Enabling Act. And again, you can only imagine why it's called the Enabling Act, because it enables Hitler to become a dictator in that nutshell. It basically gives Hitler the right to make laws for 4 years without the consent of the Reichstag. This is, a major step in Hitler establishing a dictatorship. Pay attention to the, I think I mentioned, Hitler's speech that he gives in his radio address, give me 4 years, give us 4 years. And one of the reasons why 4 years is chosen, again, is they have various year plans. They have, 1,000-year plan, 4-year plan, 5-year plans. Nazi parties were divided up into various bureaucracies for various plans. But the idea here was to say, this is all I need, and we will protect Germany and build Germany into something that is more of a resemblance of what it was previously. The Nazi Party used intimidation and persecution. Again, remember, communists couldn't take their seats. They also prevented up to 30 Social Democrats from taking their seats. And the SA and SS were stationed throughout the chamber to make sure they were intimidating members of the party. And eventually everyone stands up and salutes Hitler and Germany. And he says, this will make Germany, what it needs to be, and I will protect Germany as the new leader. The act was passed by 444 to 94. It's a pretty significant number there.
Yeah.
Imagine if you were trying to stand by maybe you were opposed to this. You believe this is wrong. You see what's coming. You were definitely now even in the minority because you're worried. Some people are worried about, their homes. They're worried about their families. They have their various reasons. Some people are just flat out intimidated.
It was a public vote. So if you didn't vote the way the brown shirts and the SS wanted you to, you're liable to get a writing crop on the side of your head.
Yeah, they call it that little plebiscite. This was, that they held actually at the end, which is, that approved Hitler's action as making himself pure. That they basically that was 96%, pretty sure 96% that voted. But also when Hitler annexed Austria, I don't know if you've ever remember the little voting cards. There's for the citizens of Austria, there's a giant circle that says yes and a little circle that says 9. This is, this is. So it's like, where do you want to vote? The Enabling Act, in addition to the procedure for the passage of legislation outlined in the Constitution, the Reich Cabinet, which is Hitler, is also authorized to enact laws. The national laws enacted by the Reich Cabinet may deviate from the Constitution, provided they do not affect the position of the Reichstag and the Reichsrat. The powers of the president remain unaffected. The national laws enacted by the Reich Cabinet shall be prepared by the Chancellor and published by the Office Gazette. They come into effect unless otherwise stated following publication. Again, same thing. The government's due powers are justified by what? Same thing we kind of covered. Say again?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
The government is justifying these new powers in the Enabling Act. How? Kind of similar to our last one.
Safety of
Yeah,
the people, safety.
Safety.
He's created chaos, and they want safety. And the other thing too is he gave Germany a purpose again, gave them pride again, gave people jobs again, put them in a fancy uniform, and he and they were eating, they weren't starving anymore, and he had a lot of power. So he creates chaos, and what's he do? He grabs the power through all this stuff.
Yeah, we're
Right.
going. Some of the next things Hitler does is he bans trade unions. So they can't cripple the government. This was a tactic that was used earlier to hurt the presidency of Friedrich Ebert. Was trade unions came together and basically stopped, and everyone in Germany stopped working. This was used earlier in the government. Banning political parties in July of 1933. There's a law against the establishment of parties. Article 1 removes all opposition to the Nazi Party. And then all local governments are then abolished. All land or parliaments are removed, and regional governors are appointed. Now, real quick, for the purpose of me trying to time this up, it's such great discussions, I'm going to kind of make sure I'm kind of going through. So I might just have briefer discussions just so we don't run out of time. I do want to look at, so under the Enabling Act, I would like to look at some really important laws legalizing racism. Anti-Jewish acts and legislation, and one of the most well-known is the Jewish Boycott. April 1st, 1933, Nazi leaders began targeting Jews and Jewish-owned businesses and the offices of Jewish professionals. They present this to people as a way to basically, as a reprisal. Jews who had basically written badly about Hitler since his appointment had made commentary. This was to be, honestly, it's presented, and this is present through much of Hitler's reign all the way up until, he actually invades Poland, testing the waters. What can I get away with? What will people accept that I will do? Milgram did this. If you ever get a chance, look up the Milgram experiment. It's a great test on what will people accept as a level of, what level of evil will people accept? And you've got to start small. Boycott is something, relatively small. And if you look at the orders for the Jewish boycott, which are a great primary source for giving to your students, it actually says, they make it a point to say they don't want no acts of violence, do not target any foreign Jews. And that actually was said in Kristallnacht as well. Make it a point to, to let people know why we're doing this, kind of make it very official, but the intention is to let Germans know that if they shop in Jewish-owned stores, that they would be basically shopping in a way that would be hurting Germany. If you look at my translation, signs say, Germans, defend yourselves against the Jewish atrocity propaganda, buy only at German shops. Germans, defend yourselves, do not buy from Jews. And oftentimes, you'll hear, and this is all throughout Germany, but you'll see signs that said, Jews are a misfortune against the Jewish atrocity propaganda abroad. So I've got a brief little snippet here from Otto Hertz I'd like you to listen to for a moment, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it better.
The 1st of April 1933 was the boycott ordered by the Nazi government. All Jewish stores had to be they put Nazi SS and Nazi brown uniforms before the Jewish stores in order that people could not go into the stores. They boycotted the Jewish stores on the 1st of April 1933. And that was also one of those humiliation days. People were afraid to come in. A few people who were of Dutch nationality, they didn't mind.
So I heard him say, some people were afraid to come in. Here's a testimony. I'm going to kind of briefly go through this. It's Edwin Landau. But I like the message, and it's something I've read to my students. I've had them read, and kind of like our reading as a primary source. It was a testimony, but it says, in the morning hours, the Nazi guards began to place themselves in front of Jewish shops and factories, and every shopper was warned not to buy from the Jews. In front of our business, also, 2 young Nazis posted themselves and prevented customers from entering. To me, the whole thing seemed inconceivable. It would not sink in that something like that could even be possible in the 20th century. As for such things that had happened, at most, in the Middle Ages. And yet it was the bitter truth that outside, in front of the door, there stood 2 boys in brown shirts, Hitler's executives. I took my war decorations and put them on and went into the street and visited Jewish shops, where at first I was also stopped, but I was seething inside. And most of all, I would have liked to have shouted my hatred into the faces of the barbarians. Hatred, hatred. When had it become part of me? It was only a few hours ago that a change had occurred within me. This land and these people that until now I had loved and treasured had suddenly become my enemy. So I was not a German anymore, or I was no longer supposed to be one. Indeed, the whole town had become alien to me. I approached the one guard whom I knew, who also knew me, and I said to him, "When you were still in diapers, I was already fighting out there for this country." And he answered, "You should not reproach me for my youth, sir. I have been ordered to stand here." And I looked at the young face, and I thought, he's right, for misguided young people. And I always said, you shouldn't reproach me for my youth. This is the fact that I'm just, he's looking at him as just misguided. So when you see something like this, we don't have time to go through all these. I'm going to kind of go through, but I want you to think about one thing. What might have influenced people to go along with the boycott? Now we'll have to skip the second question. Does anyone want to think of what might? Anybody?
Yeah, I would think. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
This is Eric. I think if they didn't go along with it, they'd have been ostracized by their own fellow Germans. That you're going against the wishes of the Reich, and that you could be persecuted for the same reason. And anybody that stuck their neck out for Jewish people, whether they hit them or did business with them, or got them to go other places in Europe, they were traitors. And they could be tried for treason. And of course, in Nazi Germany, that probably meant beheading or hanging or firing.
Well, now remember, I do want to make sure because if this early on, right now Hindenburg's still in office, and we're not quite at a point yet of trying the most drastic. We're having the most drastic responses. Abuse, being regular. Remember, these are German citizens going in, and here's the thing: there are many instances recorded through testimony of individuals just walking in, going into stores, going into shops. Their names might be posted in the paper the next day. They might be ridiculed, but it was really a test, and it succeeded because it sent a message to Jews that this is the type of government this is what you're going to expect. But in a way, it was still just a test because it only was able to last a day, or it lasted a couple of days. It didn't really last long enough to do anything more than kind of send a message, and this is what it did. So because there was an outpouring of people saying, we're still going to shop there. I still need to get my clothes dry cleaned. I still need to get my meat here. I still need to do this. I still need to function. This is not something I care to participate in. So not all of Germany stood by the Nazis and this boycott. Other laws passed in 1933, the law for the restoration of the professional civil service, which banned Jews from any civil service job. This is one of the vocab terms. Trying to ask kids under the age of 20, 25 what a civil service job is. Most of them can't tell you.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, many cannot tell you what a civil service position is. And I also said, when I define what a civil service position is, I said, why do you think it's important for the Nazis to ban Jews in civil service positions if you're trying to label them as the enemy, as well as that of being lawyers or judges, laws against, and this is laws against the overcrowding of schools and universities, which removes Jews from, schools, the denaturalization law, which is removing any naturalized Jews are no longer citizens of Germany, and then removing Jews from editorial posts, being able to make editorial posts.
Excuse me, Stephen, excuse me?
Yeah, sure.
I was looking at the wording of these. This is what is so amazing. Did you say that the law for restoration of the professional civil service was a law
Yes,
that Jewish people could not have a job?
in civil service positions.
Yeah, but that law, look at the wording of it, law for restoration.
Mhm. So the intention, again, why are we using the term restoration? Why do you think he's using restoration?
Well,
Restoration of non-Jews to become civil servants.
I think we're restoring civil service to that position of what it was before, to where it's not tainted with. And this is the way he's describing it, because there is a great correspondence between Hindenburg and Hitler, where Hindenburg sends a message to Hitler, a little communication, and says, "Mr. Chancellor, I see that you're removing Jews who have served, in the war, and removing them from, governmental positions. I don't understand why this is necessary." And Hitler responds, "I'm, trying to protect Germany, but I will, regard your wishes, and we'll try to leave individuals in who served in World War One. You can look it up. I'll try to send it to you as well." But it was even Hindenburg was saying, "I don't understand this. Why are we doing this? Why is this necessary?" And Hitler again plays it off as, we cannot have Jews in positions of authority and power. We cannot have Jews teaching our students. We cannot have Jews in our legal system. We cannot have Jews in our government system. These are all positions that make up our government, which it should be, as Hitler perceived as an Aryan or as a German government, and he did not consider Jews to be German.
so the wording of these laws is like doublespeak.
Yes. The Nazis were, if you look at most laws I would challenge you to look up the wording of most Nazi laws. They are doublespeak. A lot of Nazis are really big with using euphemisms, doublespeak, and ways of trying to really make things sound like they're beneficial,
Yeah.
but are really not. And this is very common. And these are not all the laws. There's also laws for the prevention of genetically diseased offspring, laws removing intermarriage, the sterilization laws that are coming out into place. So I'm just giving you a few. These are primarily ones that primarily targeted Jews, just in 1933. And then Nuremberg laws did not come out until 1935, and we're not going that far today. We would run out of time.
I think the amazing thing about it is how, like you're talking about sociology, of how the Nazis just made this like a drip,
Yes.
and it, rather than doing it all at once, just, oh my God, it'd be like taking a knife and just, slowly just putting it into you rather than just slicing you.
Pretty clever.
Mess them up. Oh, extremely clever.
If you get a chance, really look up Stanley Milgram's experiments. I would look up the videos on the Milgram experiments. There, you'll get to see these experiments were repeated over and over again, but with electric shocks, and just kind of to show what the idea was. In what way will people follow orders, and how do you normalize evil behaviors to where people accept them, and it's in small little doses. People begin to accept it as the norm. We're going to head out. I think we're moving along. Consolidation of the Nazi Party. So now Hitler has, he's removing enemies, or he's targeting enemies. They've removed the communists. Now, by the way, in the meantime, Dachau has been created as the first concentration camp, and Dachau serves as the model for every other camp built afterwards. Dachau and the first prisoners to be housed in Dachau are communists. And I didn't put that in there because I'm kind of going through, quickly. But once, Hitler was chancellor, he realized the SA, wants more from him. The SA were more aggressive. Remember, if you recall from, in your prior knowledge, many of you know this, but Hitler had already tried to take over Germany in a coup. They called it the Beer Hall Putsch or the Munich Putsch, which was, Hitler's one attempt to violently overtake the government in Bavaria. As he was, and he failed, and he was sentenced to prison. And I always teach in my class, he failed, but he didn't. It was a direct failure. He did not take over Germany, But he was given a chance to speak at his trial on a platform, and he was able to speak to reporters. He was able to speak to the judges, and he was given a very cushy jail sentence that he served less than a year of. It was a 5-year sentence. He served less than a year of, and he was able to write Mein Kampf in this jail, which he actually just dictated to Rudolf Hess. But he knew that violence was not the way, not because he was opposed to it, but because he realized that getting power through legitimate means was more long-term. And that's the way he viewed the Third Reich, was a long-term goal. The SA were viewed as undisciplined thugs. This was the mob. This was, people who walk around beating people up, punching people in the face. These were aggressive individuals. And the SA wanted Hitler to take over. He wanted to remove the businesses and the industrialists. And Hitler, frankly, liked having the support of the industrialists. He liked having the support of the large businesses. They gave money to his campaigns. They helped him to the ideas for rearmament. And the SA wanted to be in charge of all of that. And the SA also wanted Hitler to basically disband the army. They wanted Hitler to make the SA the new army. And Ernst Röhm had been with Hitler since day one. Ernst Röhm had helped Hitler make the Nazi Party was what it was, but he had also grown tired of what he felt was some of Hitler's lack of aggression and tactics. And he was very loyal to the SA. Now, a couple things, the people don't realize, there's a lot that is that is not always talked about in class, but Ernst Röhm was homosexual, that he'd been frequenting certain establishments, and paragraph 175, which is the law against homosexuality in Germany, had yet to have been passed, but this was one of the things that was used when the next event comes up, is that Ernst Röhm tried to orchestrate the assassination of Hitler, or had at least planned an assassination attempt on Hitler. He had grown tired of Hitler's methods. And so Hitler knew that the SA was becoming too powerful and needed to have something done. So right out of, the pages of, if you've ever watched, there's a scene in The Godfather, it was The Godfather 2, where in a single night, basically, they kind of, remove all the opposition. We have the Night of the Long Knives, or the Rome Purge. And this is where in 1934, Hitler orders the SA, go on a retreat for a month. SA leave, you're going to leave. And then he has Himmler and Goering to basically get ready to prepare to eliminate the threat of the SA. And these are the leaders. So he orders on the 30th of June, this is in 1934, the SS to go in, and actually Hitler has gone into many of the rooms himself, charging to go after many individuals who he viewed as a threat in any way, shape, or form. These are leaders of the SA. These are leaders who had spoken out. This is Ernst Röhm, Kurt von Schleicher, who was the Chancellor for Hitler, who had spoken out against Hitler. Editors for newspapers, Gregor Strasser, who was one of the original Nazi founders, who had views that were similar to Röhm. Anybody who had ever shown opposition to Hitler, they were going to be gone in these 2 nights. They called it the Night of the Long Knives, but it should have been called Nights of the Long Knives because it did last for a couple of nights. But these individuals were all assassinated, and this was, they often referred this as a mob style hits. Well, this was very gangster style in the way that these individuals were handled, and oftentimes individuals had similar names, and they'd still be killed just because they shared the same name as someone we were sent to kill, so they were killed as well. This is the newspapers read, across the various, even in the United States, leaders were killed. And the idea was, the way Hitler presented it was an effort to protect Germany from another revolution, to normalize things. People were tired of revolutions. People were tired of infighting in the country. And Hitler had, promised a peace, at the cost of basically suppressing everyone. So here's a little, this is Ludwig Spiro. I'd like you to listen to for a moment.
Well, forget, one lived in very exciting times. Before I lived at Landau, I was in Munich as a student in the Schellingstrasse. And in the Schellingstrasse, I lived in a block of, you would say, flats. I lived on the 4th floor. And that must have been in 33, June 33, no, June 34. And one night I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was a terrific bang. There was a second bang. And it was quiet again. Next morning I said to my landlady, Mrs. Pershinger, did you hear that bang? Sounded like a shot. So she said, and left the room. She brought in the coffee for the breakfast. And I went to university. I came back as usual at 4:30 in the afternoon or 5, and went in the kitchen. Mr. Person. I said, what was this business last night? So she said, there was nothing. I said, but I heard. Oh, we didn't hear anything. End of conversation. One learned later that on the 1st floor lived a Mr. Schmidt, Schmidt. The 2nd floor, there were always 2 parties on the 2nd floor, lived another Mr. Schmidt. The Gestapo, the SS, had come during the middle of the night, went to Mr. Schmidt's flat, 1st floor. Mr. Schmidt opened the door. They shot him twice and left. They meant the Mr. Schmidt on the 2nd floor, but they had taken the 1st Schmidt because there was a nameplate outside. These were the times in which one lived.
Were these gentlemen Jewish?
No. The bloke they shot was a music critic, non-Jewish. The bloke they wanted to was a member of the SR, and the SR were the Rome people. And as Hitler the same night shot Rome, there was a list of people that had to be shot. Well written up in the history book.
Okay. So, Christabel Bielenberg was a woman who basically wrote about this, and it was considered, she writes, it was considered that with the murder of Rome and the eclipse of his stormtroopers, although the manner in which it had been carried out had not been exactly savory, the revolution had, in all its intents and purposes, become respectable. Once everything distasteful had been neatly swept under the carpet, there was something almost touching about the anxious, childlike pleasure with which so many tried to share in what they seemed and hoped was a new discovered respectability. Unpleasantness in the course of this course were unpleasantnesses, but such things, if talked about at all, must be seen in perspective. There were so many more positive aspects about the regime to chat about. So these are bad things that have happened, but we can just push that aside because there's so many better things that we can talk about that make the new Germany a better and more respectable. So real quick, I'll make this quick because we don't have a whole lot of time, and I want to get to the end of the presentation and make sure I have time for questions. But do you think they could have carried out the Night of Long Knives in February of 1933, after Hitler's appointed Chancellor, immediately after? Do you think it would have been possible to have carried it out then? Jill, you're nodding your head no. You're shaking.
I don't think so. I think it was too early. And it's like you said, a lot of things had to be put in place. People had to be taken along the road, and there was a story to tell to get to that place. And so I think it was too soon, into the election. So I don't think it could have taken place yet.
I like the way you use the story to tell. You're creating a narrative that people have to follow. So that way you built this up in your mind and you realize, and many people had seen what the SA had done. And also what people don't realize is members of the army had told Hitler, if you can't get the SA under control, we'll never swear allegiance to you, ever. We will follow the president. We will follow Hindenburg. We will follow the German government as the Weimar Republic, but we will not follow you. We will not, that, because we will not be subjected to the thuggery of the SA. Never. It's not going to happen. This was a famous cartoon by David Lowe. They salute with both hands now. It's a great one to use in class if you've done this, but this is kind of like showing the long knives care about Hitler. You got Goebbels on the floor, drawn in a very mousy way, and Goering, and they're pointing their gun. Hitler's, standing angrily, looking at the members of the SA who are no longer a threat to Hitler, and then the leaders of the SA are dead in the background of the picture. It's good to use in class. It's a good visualization, but this is a very famous image in 1934 that was pushed right after the SA were removed from after the threat was removed. So next step is the death of Hindenburg. So this happened. What happened in July, in June and July, was the precursor. I'm not a speculator, but you've got Hindenburg dying again shortly after this consolidation. This is Hindenburg's memorial, August 2nd, 1934. Hindenburg dies, considered natural causes. Hitler then seizes the opportunity. He combines the offices of the president and the chancellor and declares himself Führer, which is the leader, which means leader of the Third Reich. So when we talk about language, I really want you to think about this. Is the term, Führer means leader in German. Okay, and imagine this being used now. Would you think there's a connotation now when you hear a Führer, if you've ever heard it before, or studied Hitler, or even not just heard it, Hitler's, it's kind of looking at the swastika. No matter what it might have been created for in certain religions or in Hinduism, when you see a swastika, you think of Hitler. You hear the term Führer, you think of Hitler, even though Führer means leader. It's language is very important in what people do, and things get co-opted. But this is what he declared himself. And then with that, he made the army, the Wehrmacht, swear an oath of loyalty to him personally. To him, I want you to think about this personally. This is very important. They're not making their allegiance to Germany as a whole. They're making their allegiance to Hitler because Hitler is representing himself as Germany. Hitler is Germany.
It's such a scary concept, isn't it?
It is. It is. And this is even and there are books, there are poems, and if I had more time, I would, lay them all out, but because I want to do another PD on and kind of like discuss, how children were indoctrinated throughout the Third Reich. But there are rhymes and poetry where they refer to Hitler as my mother, as my father, he is my peace, he is my home. Yes, Jill.
Didn't he? I mean, I like trying really fast to find it, but I can't. That I have this memory that he also, that instead of saying a prayer, a blessing before meals to God or Jesus, he changed it to himself.
Yes, there is, and that's supposedly what people have reported. But yeah, I mean, this is quite the quite the ego, as you see, but the belief that what he is offering. And here's the thing: is he really truly believed all of this? Even the fanaticism, he believed all of this, and many people did as well, especially what he offered. Because if you look at the roadmap that Germany was on up until the point where we get to elements like Kristallnacht, but much of Germany supported him. He had created an enemy out of the communists and Jews and the Social Democrats, and he had brought a quasi order to Germany. There are articles that were written by reporters who lived in Germany who said, it's on the whole, on the outside, it's peaceful. It seems perfect. Everyone seems happy. but in the underbelly, things are happening that are scary. If you ever watched, little dystopian or read little dystopian stories, from everything from looking at not just the ones like the Hunger Games, but like The Giver or other, stories like that. I always am wary of perfection and perfect order because, something's going on underneath, because we are human beings and we are all individuals, and to assume that we're all going to just fall in line is kind of scary. And this was nothing unique. So here's my final question to everybody before we have to wrap things up. And I'm so happy I'm making sure that we're all getting to leave on time. So in your opinion, and I'd like for as many people as possible to speak up on this individually and not just off anybody else's. What I do with my students on this is I actually have them do group discussions. I would actually have them talk with each other and come up with and agree on what they felt was the most crucial event that basically allowed him to declare himself pure. Which out of these, 4 things, which do you think was the most important in Hitler's consolidation of power to really allow him to create a dictatorship? And if you have something outside of that, I'd love to know that too, and you're looking at it. And also, by the way, I didn't include the laws in here only because I feel the laws fall under the Enabling Act. Once Hitler created the Enabling Act, it allowed him just to pass all the laws, and that was just part of using the Enabling Act to control who he viewed as his opposition and perceived opposition in Jews and communists and social democrats. So
this is Eric. I'm going to start it off. I'm going to say the Reichstag Fire.
Okay.
And the reason why is because he created the chaos that created the fear of no safety. And then the Article 48 was then put into power because it was an emergency. And that was sort of the beginning of his rise from Chancellor all the way to the Führer, the all-powerful dictator. And that the other three are just sort of steps along the way to give him the real absolute power when Hindenburg dies.
Okay.
Good point.
Good point. Good, very good point. Jill, would you like to go next?
Sure. While I agree, it's like the Reichstag Fire, it's definitely the first step. It's kind of like creating the chaos. To me, the thing that is the main thing is the Enabling Act, because with that, it took away the power from the people and the ability to have any way to control any kind of balance of power. And we've seen this in our own country. I mean, I always am very grateful for the fact that we have our 3 branches of government because, I mean, if you think about the Reichstag Fire, of course, that I do believe that the Nazis had a part in it, but let's just think about 9/11. I mean, we were scared, the entire country was scared half out of its mind. We were frozen in place for 3 days and then everything afterwards. But still, rather than allow one person to dictate everything, we had a balance of power so we could kind of take a breath and talk about what was best and stop some of the things that could have happened. We already had some of the things happen in this country, that we said would never happen again. Instead of rounding up Japanese, we were rounding up, Middle Eastern people. So I think the Enabling Act.
Okay, excellent. Good points. Good points. Anybody else care to?
I actually think that they're all important. I'm Debbie, and I actually think they're all important. However, I think the death of Hindenburg, and I recently think that is because the others were very important in getting his power, but he had to get rid of Hindenburg to declare himself Führer. He probably had a little help from some magical poison or something that killed off the Führer. But I think that, and they're all these are important and involved in it, but he could not declare himself. He had to get rid of Hindenburg to declare himself Führer. So the others were all blocks, but that was the final thing. Once Hindenburg was gone, boom. But they're all important, and I agree with all of them. And everybody said great things.
Excellent. Very much. Thank you very much, Debbie. Nancy Lee, would you like to, are you with us? Maybe so, maybe not.
I kind of,
I can hear you.
yeah.
Oops. I know you've got a bad internet connection.
I'm here.
Yeah, I think it might be cutting out too. I think it might be cutting out too much. I can't hear you. Nancy, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't hear you.
She can put it in the chat.
Yeah, Nancy, why don't you put it in the chat? That'd be great. Why don't you put, oh, she's logged out and try to log back in. Crystal, would you like to wager a response?
Well, I'm enjoying listening to all that you all are saying because a lot of this is new for me. We don't even, in middle school, 8th grade, we don't even go to this depth. But I'm not sure who said this. I agree with what I think the lady previously said about the death of Hindenburg. I think he had to die first before Hitler could take, you know, his reign of being Führer. I think the other three, like they were saying, are definitely important, but I think the door opened for him is when Hindenburg died.
Excellent. I think, I mean, here's the thing is, everyone's, you know, right. You're looking, I mean, you know, theoretically, there's also lots of discussion as to whether, you know, it was, you know, would the Holocaust have happened with or without Hitler? You know, there's lots of this, you know, because, you know, it would have been the Reichstag Fire, you know, or, you know, could something else have been created? Was he always seeking an opportunity? But, you know, what allows him to declare himself Führer? Again, 18 months. This is a very short time span for all of this to happen. You know, it's a very short time span for all of this to happen. So I am, you know, just I'm really great discussions, great responses. Thank you so much, everyone, for everything. I also thank everyone who's, you know, if you're engaging, whether you're, you know, if you're a teacher in a classroom, thank you for being on the front lines. And if you're not, even just if you're, you know, with people, thank you for being here and attending, and for also wanting to dive in deeper. Our next professional development is October. Rachel, I'm actually don't have it on here. Is it? It's on my sheet. I'm gonna look at my dates.
I think it's the 16th of October, but I'm not sure.
It is. You're right. It is October 6th.
14th.
October 14th. Yes,
Sorry.
October 14th, Wednesday. No, it is.
I didn't unmute myself. It's on the 14th at 4 p.m.
Oh,
I'm just
14th.
looking at your document you sent out. That's all. I printed it out.
So the next PD is primarily going to be discussing Holocaust Education Week, which is a part of the new mandate. I am going to discuss selecting photos, looking at Holocaust photo analysis, you know, appropriate, you know, pedagogy strategies, and the use of testimony. And then following in November, starting the week of Holocaust Education Week on Monday, I'm starting at 5, we're going to discuss the Jewish refugee crisis, the voyage of the St. Louis. You know, that is a very relevant topic. It should be really good. I'm going to try to see what I can do to see if I can even get another speaker in. That way you have to listen to me for 2 hours the whole time.
It's been very good.
I really appreciate that. It's been great having all of you. I am going to send I'm going to send a link that I'm going to give you all with a folder that's going to have some resources in it for some lessons that you can use. One is a civics lesson. There's something less that can be used in government classes that involves testimony. Another one is a lesson that is basically close reading on Hitler's speech. Another one is also on analyzing Nazi propaganda, and they're all really good lessons. They kind of all center around some of the things we've talked about today, in case, you know, for when you wish to use them. They have aligned standards that are set up with them. But again, you know, you can incorporate Holocaust discussion and make it relevant every day in various moments. And some people will say, you know, some people would, you know, argue and disagree, but the Holocaust is, you know, so well documented, and it's so important to remember and to, it really helps engage our students. And it's been proven that, you know, Holocaust education really helps teach kids empathy It teaches them about history, but also how to use and make history relevant, and to really engage and become civic-minded individuals who really want to engage and participate in society. Because it's unfortunate that apathy runs rampant in a lot of areas of the youth today, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but it is all too common. This is me. I am Stephen Pointer. I am the resource teacher again at the Holocaust Memorial Resource and Education Center. This is our address. I have two email addresses. I have one for ocps.net, which is stephen.pointer@ocps.net, or spointer@holocaustedu.org. I am so glad that all of you came. Thank you all for going easy on me. I really appreciate that, because I was sweating bullets. And also, I would get feedback really quick. So I picked Wednesday. This is me just now. I'm going off script now. I'm done. I don't have my little anything to go off of. I picked Wednesday